is not the same as your dad's, but I worked at a drugstore. I worked in the soda fountain part of the drugstore. And Dad had had an old girlfriend that had worked there before, not during the time that I was there. But all the girls there knew Sam because he used to come in to see her. And all I heard was Sammy this, Sammy that, and oh, he's so great, and Sammy, I just heard it a lot. So in my mind, I had this God built up in my head, I guess. And I knew his brother that was my age. And Bill was a very humble guy and very unassuming and just a sweet guy. And so I was expecting Sammy to be like that too. So one day I'm at the counter and one of my coworkers reaches over and nudges me and says, "Here comes Sammy, here comes Sammy." So I turn to look, and here walks this very self-assured young man. Oh my goodness. He did get his head through the door, but... And I just could not believe that this was Bill's brother. This just was not who I was expecting at all. That's my first memory. However, you might want to ask your dad that.
Well, I would like to add to the relationship with Bill. Bill and I were pretty close, and we did a good many things together, but we were vastly different.
Clearly.
Clearly.
Yes.
But the first time I remember meeting Sarah, I had moved out of the house, but I caught the mumps. And so I went home for my mom, to nurse me while I recovered from the mumps. And your mom came to the house. Bill brought her over there for a dinner one evening. While I was there, I was sitting on the couch or in a chair or something in the living room, and I didn't want to get into their party or interfere with what they were doing, nor did I want to take a chance on giving somebody else what I had. So that was my first memory of meeting her. A few weeks later, a few days later, maybe, Bill came to me and says, "Well, what do you think of George?" And there's a story about the George name. We'll get to that later. But my response was, "Well, she's just a silly kid."
Well,
so I would say our early impressions of each other weren't the most favorable.
And I do remember going to their house, and Woody was the stepdad, and I was really afraid of him. Just the things that Bill had told me, I felt like I really needed to watch my P's and Q's, because one of the things that he had even said was something about table manners, and so I was really concerned about not making Woody mad. It was an interesting evening, and I would not have minded catching the mumps from your dad because I had not had them, and my mother didn't have them until she was 21, and she had a terrible time with them. And so in my mind, if I could have them younger, I would be better off than waiting until I'm an adult.
Well, if that's not the foundation of love, I don't know what is.
Oh, I think I've got Lucy hair up my nose. I think we're okay.
Okay. Well, so when did you figure out that you were star-crossed lovers?
Well, that took some time for me.
We,
but you tell your story. Go ahead.
well, there were several of us teenage girls that were working at that drugstore, and we'd get off late in the evening. And on weekends, we would go midnight bowling or to a late movie. That was about all we did. Or there was a little place that we could go sit and have Cokes and that sort of thing. But that was about all there was to do at that time of night. And there were a group of guys that would come as we were getting off work, and they would take us bowling, movies, or whatever. So during that time, I got to know Dad a little bit, and but he didn't pay me any attention whatsoever.
Well,
No.
that bunch that we hung out with, it was just a gang, and
Yeah.
that's what we referred to ourselves at.
Yeah.
And so we would, nobody dated anybody. Everybody went as part of the group. When we'd go out to eat or go to a movie or go midnight bowling, we were just part of the gang.
But if we were being partners on a bowling side or anything like that, he never chose me. It was the other girls that he chose. And then I had this crush on him, and he had nothing. I mean, you know, I was just
Totally
one gang.
oblivious. I didn't know it until much later. Well, not much later, but later.
So how'd you find out?
Oh, you want to tell that
No,
story?
you
No,
can tell.
okay. Woody, my stepdad, had a sister who lived not far from where we were, and down in Mississippi. But she got sick, and she came to Memphis to be treated, and they hospitalized her. Her name was Aunt Clara. Well, one evening while Aunt Clara was in the hospital, Bill comes to me and he says, "Let's go see Aunt Clara." I said, "Okay." So I got the car, and after we got in it, Bill says, "Well, let's go pick up George." When are we going to tell that story? Anyway, I said, "Sure, that's fine." So we drove by and picked Sarah up at her home, and then drove uptown to the hospital. And we were in the room with Aunt Clara visiting, and just, you know, just having a good old time as much as you could with Aunt Clara. She was she kind of looked on the dark side of things. She didn't have much fun to say or much fun in her life. But at any rate, she said, we were sitting around talking, and she looked at Sarah and says, "Okay, Sarah, so whose girl are you?" Well, I knew she was just part of the gang, you know, so I turned to laugh, and as I was doing it, I said to Aunt Clara, "Oh, she's just one of the gang, Aunt Clara." And
She's nobody's girl.
Yeah, she's nobody's girl, she's just one of the gang. And I turned to look at Sarah, and she was looking straight at me.
Oh, Aunt Clara said she may have you boys fooled, but she's got her eye on one of you.
And that's when I said, "Oh, well, she's just," no, I turned to look at her just to laugh, you know, and just to show Aunt Clara was wrong, and she was looking right at me. Oh boy, you could have knocked me over with a feather, to use an old saying. I was stunned.
So stunned that
Yeah. We decided after we left the hospital to go home, we decided we'd stop at a donut and coffee shop on the way home. And so we did, but rather than go in to get our donuts or everything, we just picked them up and got back in the car. And as I was backing out of the parking lot, I backed the car into a light pole. Spilled coffee all over Sarah, because she was holding mine and hers. Oh, me. I was caught off guard.
And if we backed up enough to get the George part in, when we moved to Memphis, I rode a school bus, and there were not as many girls on the bus as there were boys. And the girls that got on before us were already sitting together. There were, the first rows had girls, and so that had me sitting in the back. Of course, that really upset me, but I was back there with those boys, and that just terrible.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. So one day, one of the boys started to tell a joke, and he got into it, and then he looked over and saw me, and he said, "If you're going to sit back here with the boys, you're going to have to be one of us. So you got to have a boy's name." And they named me George, and that stuck. It got out all over school. Even when I go back to reunions now, there will be classmates that will refer to me as George. And the truth is, my own brother still does.
Yeah. Yeah. So she became George, one of the guys.
Yeah.
She, in fact, when she played, they didn't have a basketball team for girls at that time. So there was a social organization, what is it called?
Y-Teens.
Y-Teens, that was made up of girls. And she played on the Y-Teens girls basketball team. In fact, partly because of that and a number of other things, she was voted most athletic in her graduating class.
So do you remember how long after the Aunt Clara revelation before you actually started dating? How did the dating actually come about?
Well, the Aunt Clara thing was in the spring, and the dating started in the summer when we started planning a going away party for Bill.
Bill dropped out of high school and joined the Navy because his home life was so miserable that he just couldn't take it anymore. So he elected to do that. And I'm not sure exactly which of us had the idea first about giving Bill a going away party, but it was decided that there would be a going away party for Bill. And Sara said, "We can do it at my house," without even consulting her parents. She just made that decision. I said, "Well, I'll help you plan it." So we started, working together on that party. And it was during that time that I became better acquainted with her and found that she had a number of qualities that I really liked and admired. She was not the silly kid I thought she was earlier. So one thing led to another, and I eventually, after Bill left, I eventually asked her out for a date.
Well, according to my diary from that time, it was maybe a month after that party. We did go out, and then maybe one or two dates, and I wrote in there that we had a serious conversation about our future. I mean, that's pretty quick. But I was very much aware that it was going to take a long time for us to get anywhere. And then I think it was a week after that he gave me his class ring. So.
Well, that is a long time.
I was young and time just kind of stood still in those days.
Well, that happened right before I started back to school, my senior year. And the very beginning of school, Ms. McElroy was our school counselor, and she. I was in study hall and I got called down to the office, and I couldn't imagine what I really figured that it had something to do with Y-teens, but I went down there and she had me sit down, and it seemed a little serious, and Miss McElroy didn't usually have that tone with me, and she said, "Sarah, I need to talk to you." She said, "I hear you are dating Sammy Escue." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "I don't think that's a good idea." "You don't?" And I love Ms. McElroy.
As did I.
And she said, "Sammy is a very smart young man, but I've seen how he treated his girlfriend, and I don't want you treated like that." She said, "He told her when to inhale and when to exhale. He told her everything to do." And I thought, Sam? That doesn't sound like Sam to me at all. And so I didn't tell her I would or I wouldn't, but I left there thinking, this is really strange. So then I talked to Sam about it, and he said that that the other girl and I were very different people, because I knew I wouldn't have been there 2 minutes if he'd been telling me what to do and how to do and what I could do and all that. So anyhow, Miss McElroy didn't say anything else to me, but she did, she did make me aware of that. And then when we lived in Jonesboro, that had to have been several years after that, we got a phone call from Miss McElroy. And she and her husband had bought a home to retire in Arkansas, and they were going to be coming through, and they wanted to come by our house, and they did. And then we went up to Hardy and visited them. So it was, even though she had been against it to start with, she came around.
What year was that?
That she came to Arkansas?
No, that she called you into the office.
63.
63. And when did you marry?
64.
Fall of 64.
15 months later.
So how'd that come about?
I took my time about all major decisions. As you may have noticed, I was not in any hurry to do anything that required much of a commitment. but I like giving somebody my class ring. So, as we mentioned, Sarah's mom developed cancer and had to have surgery, and Sarah came home from school in the fall of 64 to be with her mother while she had surgery. This was about midterm time, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, it was. So it was on into the fall. It wasn't early fall. And I took her back to Blue Mountain after her mom's surgery, and she came home. We went down on a Friday, I believe. And just on the spur of the moment, one of those irrational, what's the term? Irresponsible moments of living life, we decided that we'd make it permanent. So we sneaked off and we said our vows, and we were going to keep it a secret, but somehow it got out around the campus.
Did you go to a JP's office?
Yeah. Anyway, it was, and in those days there was no waiting period, so it was not hard to do. But I knew without a doubt that this was the woman I wanted to spend my life with. And here we are 52 years later, and I still feel the same way. In fact, we were talking about having this discussion, and we decided that we're even more in love today than we were then. You agree with that?
Yeah. I didn't realize when I went to Memphis for mother's surgery that I was missing all my midterm tests. And I'm just throwing in another one of those blessings that I've had in my life. But when I went back to school, I went to a lit class, and Ms. McKinstry was the teacher, and she told me she wanted to see me after class. So I went up to her desk, and she asked about Mother, and she was very, very kind. And then she said, "Well, you missed your midterm exam." So she reached over on her desk and got the exam and just folded it in two and stuck it in the back of my book. And she said, "After you've had time to study, I know this is going to be, all your classes you're going to have, your tests you're going to have to do. So when you've had a chance to study, take your test and then put this in my mailbox." That was it. Just totally trusted me. Just a really sweet thing.
That was the atmosphere at Blue Mountain. Blue Mountain didn't have, what am I trying to think of? You had societies.
Yeah, instead of sororities.
You had no sororities. So there was no rush. But there was still a rush, you understand? And Mom had selected the Uzelian Society, which is one of three societies on campus there. And I am the only official male member of the Uzelian Society because of my relationship to Mom. They had a code of honor, and they adhered to it, and everybody adhered to it. There was never a question. You go to Blue Mountain College, you're an honorable person. You'll do the right thing. And that applied to everybody on campus, not just the students, but the faculty, the staff, the administration, and visitors as well. So that's rare.
Including sneaking off and getting married at the JP's office her freshman year?
Well, I didn't live on campus.
Oh, well.
So
The
I
loophole.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't break any school rules.
Right. But somehow the word got out that we had done this, and it was kind of a joke around there. One of the things Mom did while she was there, she played in a production that her class did of Camelot. And she played one of the main characters, I don't recall which one. But one of the things that was said about that production was that it was typecast. Mom played one of the maidens in the group, and she sang, "Where are the simple joys of maidenhood?" And the audience just died laughing. So we've had some experiences. We've I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't recommend anybody else do it. But I wouldn't take anything for having done it.
You gave each other a very interesting first New Year's together
Oh, yeah.
as a married couple.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where the idea even came from, but it was New Year's Eve, and I said to Sam, I've got an idea. Let's make a resolution for each other and promise that we'll keep it.
And I said, okay. You know what it's like when you're young and in love.
So we got paper, we wrote these, we folded the papers, and we decided that at midnight we would exchange resolutions.
So that's what we did. I gave her the resolution I had written for her, and she gave me the one she'd written for me.
So at midnight, I opened mine, and it said, "Stop nagging me about my smoking."
And I opened mine, and it said, "Stop smoking." You know, she hasn't nagged me one time about my smoking since that night.
And that's the only New Year's resolution I've ever kept.
It may be the only one I ever kept.
But he just reached in his pocket and he took that pack and just crushed it and threw it over in the trash. And that was the last
Cigarette I ever smoked.
Last of his smoking.
Of course, I had a sore mouth for weeks afterward because to help fight the urge to smoke, I would go to the drugstore and I'd buy big bags of hard candy, butterscotch and peppermint and you name it. And I kept a piece of candy in my mouth for weeks. But I got through it. Ain't love grand?
I saved your life.
Yep.
So you did go on to have a traditional church wedding.
Yeah.
We did. Mother really wanted us to have a church wedding.
She had two goals, I think, for Sarah in her life. One was to graduate college, and number two was to see the two of us walk down the aisle together.
So we had decided that we would do this, but we would do it at her home church. It was the church I grew up in too, but we didn't do this in Memphis where we lived, but in Myrtle.
Now, I might want to add at this point that her dad was opposed to it. There were several reasons. Two main ones were, one, I was from a broken home, and people from a broken home just couldn't stay married. And number two was he knew that Miss Louise was ill, and at that point terminally. He knew by then she was terminally ill. And he still had two boys at home younger than your mom. So he needed help.
Oh, I have to disagree with you on that one. I think his second one was that you didn't have a degree.
Well,
Those were the two things that he came from a broken home and he didn't have a degree, and those were the things Dad had planned for my life. And when we started talking about this wedding, Dad was, he didn't approve of it at all. And Mother said to him, "You know how Sarah is. If she is not married by the time I die, she won't get married. She'll stay right here and take care of you and Ronnie." And that changed Dad's thinking immediately, because he did want me to be married. He did not want me to not have a partner.
And years later, somebody said something, or it may have been Sarah said something to him about how much he was opposed to our getting married and how much he disliked me and distrusted me in the beginning. And he said, "What? I never said that." Well, he had, but
I think as much of him as I do my own sons, is what he said. But Sam won Dad over real quickly because Mother did, right after the wedding and graduation, Mother went home and went to bed, and she never got up again. She was down for 8 months. And during that time, Sam would go.
well, I started college too.
He was at Memphis State, and he would go over between classes or at lunchtime or whatever and sit with her. Well, that changed Dad's thinking a lot. And Dad did love Sam.
He did, and I loved him. He was a great man.
But the wedding, Mother Mother was doing a little bit better, and we were just hoping that she'd be able to attend, because truthfully, this was for her more than it was for us. And we didn't send invitations. There weren't church weddings at that time. I had only been to 2 church weddings in my life, and just one at Old Oak Grove. But we didn't send invitations. We had an announcement in the weekly paper, the Gazette. My picture was there in the write-up, and at the end it said, close friends and relatives of the family are invited. So I think they prepared for about 50.
Yeah.
And 50 was a lot for Old Oak Grove community.
Well, it was a lot. I mean, that was a big event in those days, and in that community particularly. But I said to Sarah, I said, "I think you're making a mistake." I said, "You better prepare for more than twice that many." Now, the church would seat maybe 200?
No,
150?
maybe 100.
Well, whatever. It was a small church. I said, there are going to be people from all over the county coming to this wedding because your mom's going to be there, and they're going to want to see her. And it may be their last chance to ever see her alive. Well, that was kind of a cruel way to put it, but it was a fact. So we got there, and people started showing up, and they kept showing up, and they kept showing up. There were people standing around. Every pew seat was full. There were people standing around the outside walls, and in the back, there was no air conditioning in the church, so the windows were open, and there were people standing outside looking through the windows to the church. There must have been 300 people there.
On one side of the church, you could actually stand and look in the windows. On the other side, the windows were too high, but people were standing there looking in.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting.
Somebody, they had a cake prepared for the wedding, and somebody saw the crowd, and they left the community and went to downtown New Albany and bought another cake and brought it. And instead of a cup of beverages, they'd get a couple of tablespoons full. But it was the event of the century for Old Oak Grove community. The ceremony was performed by the minister who had been the Jernigan family and Gatlin family for years before, and he was the minister. He was retired. Brother Cox was retired. He came and did the ceremony for us, and he was quite a character, and that was quite an event. It was an event.
Yeah, that was special.
At a lot of levels. It was our public declaration of our commitment and fidelity to each other, but it was also a celebration for Sarah's mom.
Yeah. And then my graduation was the next weekend. And then we went away for a few days, and when we got back, we went to Mother's and Daddy's, and we watched her walk up the 2 steps that you had to take to get up to the bedrooms, and that was her last time to ever be down in the living room area. So the timing was just, it was just scripted.
Those things happening close together as they did were her last hurrah.
Yeah.
And I still get misty thinking about it.
Was that the hardest thing that you have overcome?
I don't know. I think
that was hard.
it was very hard because she suffered for such a long time. She lived for 8 months after that. So that was a really difficult time. And that was another time that I was so grateful that we were together, because Sam was a real strength to me. And so he was just very supportive. He and I would go over on weekends. I was teaching just out of Memphis, and so I didn't go see Mother during the week, and Sam was seeing her, so he could tell me what kind of day she was having. And then on the weekends, we would go over, and there was always somebody that would sleep in the room with Mother. We had a little makeshift cot beside the bed, and so we would take turns doing that.
And it would give relief to Sarah's dad.
Yeah, or my grandmother, or whoever was
whoever
there.
happened to be there. They were there night and day,
Yeah.
around the clock. So it would give them some relief, and it would give us an opportunity to visit with her mother. She was still able to talk and visit. Even though she was in a lot of pain, there were members of the community who would come in and administer pain relief medicine to her, shots and that sort of thing. She had a lot of support. She was a beloved member of her community. So that was tough. I think one of the hardest times for me, though, was when my business failed. I refused to give up my moral standards just to be a successful business person. I didn't think you had to. I had examples in my life of men who were successful business people, Roy Cooper, for one, and good, moral people. But I wouldn't do some of the things that some of my competitors were doing, and so they were getting the business and I wasn't. And we just didn't have enough income to keep the business alive. It failed. That was pretty tough. It was hard on me, and it was hard on our relationship too. That may have been overall the most difficult period I went through.
We consider that our poor days.
Yeah.
That was,
And it took years to recover from it. You're aware of it. You know what it was like.
You think that's the hardest thing you went through together, Mom?
it certainly would be up there high. Going through together, I would say probably yes.
There have been other times as well that were hard. And hard on both of us. The loss of her mother was really tough. I loved that woman and admired her so much, and it was hard. Loss of my mother was pretty tough. And just recently, Bill's death has affected me in ways that I never expected it to. It's been more emotional for me than I ever thought it would be. Of course, I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about Bill dying, but you know, it came as such a shock to me, and I've had to deal with it, and it hadn't been easy. But the business failure, I think, was probably the toughest overall.
What about Granddaddy?
Well, that obviously is a biggie for me, but I don't. It's not the same. Our relationship wasn't involved in that like it was with Mother's or with the business. But having Dad missing for 17 days before his body was found was awful. It was not anything that we ever dreamed of going through, and that's really a toughie for me.
We got the news at one of our family reunions. You know, we had those reunions every 2 years. It was a tradition that Mother started, and we siblings decided that we wanted to continue it. So every 2 years we'd get together for one of our week-long flings somewhere at some resort area somewhere in the country or something. And we were at one of those. Do you recall where it was?
I was in Tennessee,
Yeah.
East Tennessee.
And they discovered that her dad was missing, and we put her on a plane, and she flew down, and I guess Lonnie picked you up.
Lonnie and Ronnie
picked her up at the airport in Memphis and drove her down. And I remember getting the call the day that they found his body. I was crushed, and she was too.
Well, I don't think you get through 52 years of marriage without going through some hard stuff.
No, and even though we were naive when we did it, we realized that that was going to happen, and I think knowing that going into it gave us the strength to get through some of these hard times. And I have to say that the happy times have been far greater than the hard times.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, tell me about some of the nicest things you've done for each other. Let me have your glass. Now, don't tell me the nice thing you did for the other one.
Can I tell you a funny thing he did for me that was really nice?
Yes.
I was at work one day, one Valentine Day, and he came to work and he brought me a little basket with some chocolate-covered strawberries that he had obviously fixed for me. And we went out to lunch. We'd already decided it'd be smarter to go at lunchtime because at night it would be so hectic. And so we went to lunch, and 3 times during that lunch, he kept mentioning that he had to get home and clean the kitchen. And I couldn't figure out what the problem was because the kitchen was clean when I left for work that morning. And he is not the one that's really big on cleaning the kitchen. And I, you know, he had chocolate coated these strawberries, but how much, you know, that couldn't have taken many dishes or pots and pans or whatever. So he finally told me that he had seen this program, I think he saw it on the computer, whereby you took a balloon and blew that up, you melted chocolate, and then you put the balloon in the chocolate, and it formed a basket. Well, the basket I got was not chocolate. Anyhow, he said he did that, and the balloon burst.
In a container of molten chocolate. And I'll leave the rest to your imagination.
Not to be outdone, he did it a second time
A slow learner.
with the same results. So I said to him, honey, don't you worry about cleaning the kitchen. I'll come home and lick it when I get there. I got home, there was chocolate in the most unimaginable places.
There was chocolate on the ceiling.
Yes, now on the cabinets, on the floor, and I opened the freezer and a little piece plunked down. It was everywhere. So that was probably the funniest thing that that is a giver. So he has done lots of nice things for me. Even when we were dating, he gave me very nice things. And you want to tell him about my graduation from high school present?
Yeah, when she graduated from high school, I bought her a present for her, and we got into an argument before I gave it to her about something, and she made some comment, and I said, well, you want me to just give you your television now? I had bought her a portable, battery-operated television to take to college with her. And it was a pretty rare treat. I mean,
That was a very nice gift. 4.5-inch black and white.
Battery-operated television. We watched that television for years, but I somehow I just couldn't let her be surprised by it. I had to spoil that surprise.
But one year he was determined that I was not going to know what my gift
Oh, I was just going to ask about
was.
that.
Well,
You're difficult to give gifts to.
Yes,
Why is she difficult to give gifts to?
because she can always figure out what they are. She can look at the package or look in the checkbook or I don't know what. techniques she uses, but she always finds out what her gifts are.
Well, this was the first year that I was teaching school, and he had bought my gift, and I knew he had bought it. He had told me that much, but I didn't see it. It wasn't anywhere visible, and I had looked around a little bit, and I had not found it. And he was quite proud of himself. He had attached it to was it the top of the cedar chest, the underside of the cedar chest?
No, it was the underside of the cedar chest. The side that sits down next to the floor.
Oh, okay. And I would never have found that. Well, then the next year, we were living in an apartment in Memphis, and he had bought a gift and suspended it in the closet.
Above the door.
Oh, it was on the closet. It was on the rod where the clothes were, but he had it suspended with fish line, was it? I mean, I didn't see, but he had it secured. It was hanging halfway up the closet, and then he pushed clothes over there, and I would never have found that.
I think those were the only 2 times in my life that I was successful at concealing her gift from her ahead of time. Things she's done for me, it's...
Not much, have I?
Well, I guess I just take for granted that she does things, and so for some reason they're just not that memorable to me. Yet,
I love it.
I'm just...
Well, she did something for your 70th birthday.
Yeah, she did.
Gosh, I'm going to have to start being more memorable.
There you go. Do more outlandish things. For my 70th birthday, we went down to the coast to visit John and Carrie, and she gave me a fishing trip, a chartered fishing trip, and I caught the biggest fish that charter captain had caught that season, and I was featured in the paper.
And she contacted every single person who knew you.
Yeah, she wanted to get 70 greetings to me, and there must have been 150. I got greetings from people that I hadn't seen or heard from since childhood, literally. And I still have those.
That turned out to be a gift as much for me as it was him, because I was the one that made phone calls. Getting to talk to people from our past was really neat. But what we did was went over to Ashley's, and we stuffed her mailbox after the mail carrier had been by. We put all those cards in the mailbox, and then her mailbox was a little wobbly, and Dad was going to go out there and secure it a little bit. So he went out to work on it, and Ashley said, while you're out there, bring the mail in. So that's when he discovered.
A whole bag full of
And he
greeting
spent the
cards.
whole afternoon doing nothing but going through those cards.
And smiling.
Yep.
That was a great Christmas, a birthday gift. It was great.
Man, I'm glad I did something.
Yeah. I am too. It was special.
Any final thoughts on those early married years?
Well, as I've said, I couldn't tell you how many times I would not advise anybody to do it. I wouldn't do it again. I would take a different approach. But I'm glad we've had the experience. We've been together, we'll be 52 years this fall, and they've been great. Great living with your mother.
Well, I just think that we're just very blessed people.
Absolutely.
I think we've been blessed. I think I've been blessed all my life, and that's certainly true of our married life. And now that we've retired, it's kind of fun. You know, we can lay back and do nothing if we want to. We can be as involved as we want to, and we've been blessed with good health and are able to do. So I just feel like we've had a very blessed relationship.
Well, and we've been blessed in a lot of other ways as well. We've been blessed with good friends all around the country, all around the eastern United States, from, well, actually beyond the Mississippi River to the East Coast, up and down, north and south, just half the country.
Well, we've been blessed more than that, just with the 3 daughters we have, and the
Yeah.
sons-in-law we have, and the grandchildren we have.
Yeah.
We feel very blessed.
I've been friends and acquaintances with a number of men in different situations in life, and I can't think of a man I know who is more blessed than I am with his children. Many of them have children who are disappointments. I don't, not in the least. My girls have brought me much, much joy and much pride as well. I like to talk about them. I like to say, look what my girls have done. I like to say, look at their families, look at their lives, look at their mates, look at their accomplishments. Dr. Phil, somebody I read a quote from one time, said the best predictor of future accomplishments is past accomplishments. And I got a lot to look forward to in my girls. They're a source of pride.